Hello, good morning, Liv. How's it going?
It's going on fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm not too bad, not too bad. Didn't sleep too well last night, I have to say.
Neither did I, but
yeah.
we'll power through.
It's one of those days, but speaking of one of those days, today we're sort of talking a little bit about one of those topics, as it were. The topic that often comes up, especially amongst students, when they're in the pub, and talking about the merits of arts and sciences when it comes to higher education. Now, this may sound as though it's a very niche conversation, folks, for those of you at home. You may be going, well, I've never been to uni, or I'm not planning on going, why should I care? But just bear with us. But I suppose, Liv, would you like to just just sort of spell out what is the core of this argument between arts and science?
Well, the reason why it is discussed, especially in between archaeological students, is because, at least in Sweden, and I think also in the UK, archaeology is classified as an arts subject, or a humanity. But in the universal world, you have a very clear distinction between the arts and the sciences, making it kind of weird when you're in the middle, like we are, because we do science stuff like geology and some medicine, or well, on dead people, but it still counts as medicine. And
far from preemptive in that sense, yeah.
A lot of chemistry, like the carbon dating, and different dating analysis. But we still count as an art, which also English, literature, philosophy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Regular history.
Yeah.
So, at least in Sweden, it gets kind of tricky for the system, and it's also kind of a group thing. That you classify either as a science or an arts student, which can cause very different it's kind of like high school cliques.
Yeah, kind of like a rivalry. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was a student, I was constantly being accused by those who were doing actual science degrees of being a weakling artist. Someone who couldn't handle the rigor of actual science. And and
then you look at them and you're like, well, yeah, I'm just going to finish off my GIS then.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. You're working with data. You're having to use that sort of whole, I suppose, post-enlightenment, positivistic, scientific approach to lots of the data that you're doing. But I would argue, and this is actually where I suppose the petty element of this debate comes, I would argue that an artist has to be a good scientist and, God forbid, have an imagination. But I suppose I mean that's an element of it. I mean, and in Britain, yeah, we do have the BA for the Bachelor of Arts, and then BSc, Bachelor of Sciences, and you can sort of follow those different strands. But often in the minds of especially undergrads, and I suspect, as you touched on there, those who fund archaeology, for example, never the twain meet. And perhaps this is the real impact of this art science problem, is that it means that people actually outside of our discipline have the same prejudice, but with much more, much far-reaching implications. So, for example, more often than not, as an artist, you have to apply in Britain, say, to the Arts and Humanities Research Council if you want to maybe do a PhD or something like that, to sort of fund research. But if you're doing a science, if you are a scientist even, for example, you have a plethora of options because it's seen as potentially profitable.
Yeah.
I mean, is it like that abroad?
Well, we have a kind of a unique system in Sweden or in Scandinavia where the university pays PhD students like salary, so we don't have that much of a funding problem. I mean, if you want to do extra stuff, you still need funding, and many universities look very favorably on students who can get funding, because funding is always nice. But yeah, if you're doing science, or especially medical science, it's so much easier to get funding for your research than for an arts project. And it's also kind of funny because I've been trying to get a lot of funding recently for different projects. There's a hell of a lot more, I mean, real arts, if I can say it like that, like painting, sculpting, music.
So sort of the cultural arts, capital C culture. Art. Yeah.
They also have a lot of funds because people know they are underfunded from official points of economics, but when we come in this kind of grey area where we talk about anthropology, archaeology, history, it's much harder to find outside funding as well, because they're kind of, I don't know why, but maybe it's not fashionable anymore.
Now that said, though, I suppose there is a flip side to that, and that is that it does mean that archaeologists can try to work the system beyond, for example, academia. So, for example, if I wanted to put together a certain type of workshop and maybe take it on a tour of the country, which might be a plan for the near future, wink wink, then I can try and angle it towards meeting the criteria of certain funding bodies. So, for example, in Britain there's something called the Wellcome Trust, spelt W-E-L-L, Wellcome, and they fund particularly things to do with medicine, medical research and medical teaching. So if you can sort of find an angle, you can always smudge it a little bit, and I suppose that's partly the beauty of archaeology, is that because it studies a bit of everything, you might be able to find funding from almost anywhere. But in this sense, and this is where I think we come down to an interesting question. Therefore, does archaeology need a different designation as opposed to arts or science? So, for example, if you're doing literature, you can have an MLit, Master of Literature, this kind of thing. If you're doing engineering, there's such thing as a BEng, a Bachelor's in Engineering, and there are various other sort of smudgy and specific ways of referring to courses and training, which I think encapsulate what the student or the person has done much more well. I mean, do you think that's what's needed for archaeology? Maybe we need like a BArch?
I also think that the universities need to, I mean, at least in Sweden, because I know we have had problems with archaeology courses that are clearly scientific, like we're talking DNA, osteology, some field research, GIS courses, that in any other way, if they were anything but archaeology, they would go in the science department. But they're still classified as art courses, because they're archaeology courses, which make them get arts funding, which is much lower than the science funding, because teaching art is much cheaper, apparently, than teaching science.
Even though you need things like mass spectrometers and labs and
sending things for dating or DNA analysis. It becomes cheaper apparently if you're an archaeologist than if you're a bioscientist.
Yeah, and that's the great thing actually, of course, because when you go to buy this equipment and you say, I'm an archaeologist, the person who's selling it goes, oh, we'll give you it for less then. Sorry, slightly dry.
We're not bitter.
No, not bitter at all. But I don't know, because we were, I mean, this conversation's come out of a bit of a chat we were having the other day, where we were sort of talking about that jokey rivalry in university, and how you do have that kind of that ribbing of each other when it comes to whether or not you're an artist or a scientist. And I mean, just out of curiosity, what so no matter what you do, you're always going to be branded as an artist in Sweden, then, are you?
Yeah. Right. If I don't take real science courses.
Right. Okay. So
I mean, I have done CAD, so I kind of fall into the data spectrum as well.
Okay, okay. So data and humanities, I suppose. It's kind of like, you know, you're always besmirched. And I suppose actually, and that's one of the reasons actually why I was, because I was offered at the beginning of my university career the chance to switch to a BSc instead of a BA, and I didn't. I was determined to see the BA through, primarily because actually I didn't really see why there had to be a distinction. But then again, I don't know, maybe it actually comes down to training. I mean, maybe the fact that you can, for example, focus on conservation or seed counting, I mean to say specialised observation of botanical remains using microscopes, etc. The fact that you can specialise in that should be recognised in some way. But
yeah, or just like osteology.
Yeah.
I mean, how much more medical science can you get?
yeah, exactly. But perhaps something like a B.Arch or a BSc Arch or something like that would be helpful, so that people can get a sense that you're not just like a book reader, or you're not just a philosopher, perhaps, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, do you think that maybe actually one answer is to make it so that there are certain scientific standards that have to be taught in archaeology, so that everyone is demonstrably more than just an artist, as it were, you know? So maybe there should actually be a bit more scientific rigor before we start lobbying for, because it is possible in archaeology, you know, in Britain, for example, to smudge your way through being a bit of an artsy-fartsy, non-scientific type person, you know, going, oh, Neolithic hippies. It is possible to do that.
Yeah.
So maybe, I mean, do you think what we need to actually be doing is getting our own house in order and making sure that we're all a bit more sciencey, as it were?
Well, I think we would greatly benefit from having more science courses as well. I mean, if you read archaeology, at least in Gothenburg in Sweden, you don't have to read anything about, or we go through basic geology and stuff like that, but not very much. I mean, a pure geological course with like geology students would be beneficial for most archaeologists. And the same with basic chemistry or things like that, so you can understand the process behind, let's say, carbon dating or different kind of analysis methods that you use to date places.
Well, actually, in that sense, I've definitely been on digs in the past where there'll be one person who's read a book on geology, and they'll be just, you know, forehead slapping when they realise that actually all the archaeologists around them don't understand simple things about geological deposition processes, or even just like how a floodplain works, this kind of thing. But yeah, so maybe that's possibly the core of the problem here, is that maybe archaeology is just a bit too big.
Yeah, and I mean, also, I mean, I have some basic data competences, because my father was a computer geek and I'm a computer geek, and I read computer geekiness for my own pleasure, which means when I sometimes come out in the field, I become the computer expert. I mean, we are very, very differently suited as archaeologists for what we do. And I mean, it's part of the charm that you can find someone who has no idea how to work the GIS. But it can also be kind of frustrating when you're trying to explain how a database works for someone and they just don't get it. So,
have we actually come back round in full circle? Are we now saying that actually... oh no! Are we actually now saying that there is now, and there should be, differences between an archaeological scientist and an archaeological artist?
No, I think that every archaeologist should have the basic know-how, or at least being offered the basic know-how. Then if you cultivate that know-how or not is up to you as an archaeologist, what you are interested in. But the archaeologists and archaeology should absolutely be taught on both sides of the fence, so to speak, in kind of a science-artist mix-up, because the scientist needs the artist the arts kind of perspective.
Yeah.
But we also need what we classify as the scientific part to make sense of our data.
Okay. Well, actually, it's funny you should say that. I'm reminded of a conversation I once had with a housemate of mine who's a chemist, and chemists, man, chemists. You know, there can be some amazing chemists out there, and the chemists that can be brilliant in bars, actually, really good mixtures that they can come up with, but some of them just lack imagination. And so there's one conversation I remember having where we were talking about a film called Sunshine, and it's a great film. It's a science fiction film, and it's actually one of the few science fiction films where it has on the DVD a commentary dedicated to the science behind the film. And in this instance, it's actually Brian Cox, the physicist, talking about, because he was the consultant, talking about the plausibility of the scientific elements in the film. So things like, for example, trajectories and slingshot maneuvers and how exactly the sun might be cooling down, this kind of thing. And so they've gone to great lengths to make the science fiction as plausible as possible. And I said, do you want to watch this? It's great. I've seen it twice in the cinema. Just bought the DVD. Let's have it. Let's watch it. And he goes, oh no. I hate anything that promotes bad science. I'm not going to watch it. And that really annoyed me, because the same guy had lightsabers and Star Wars coming out of his ears, and you're like, well, that's science, that's total fiction. And he's like, no, but this one isn't trying to be real. I'm like, what? and so what I did actually was, for the rest of my time in that house, I pinned a quote to my door, which was Einstein saying, imagination is more important than knowledge, for imagination helps us sort of reach beyond the bounds of knowledge and actually add, therefore, to the knowledge which we already have. And so I thought that was a really important lesson to take away from this stuff, this discussion, I suppose, more broadly speaking, is that actually, as you say, the scientist needs the artist needs the scientist. And maybe... Sorry?
Archaeology without imagination is so boring.
Yeah, exactly. So, or for example, when people...
I mean, we tried it in the 70s in Sweden. It doesn't work.
No, exactly. Yeah, you tried it. Just imagining lots of very dry IKEA-like diagrams of archaeological sites with no writing.
No, we have like, it's awful. Like the reports from digs, they weren't allowed to interpret because the interpretation was subjective and everything had to be objective, which means that you have this immensely scientific like angles and millimeters descriptions of things, because they weren't allowed to say it's a stone axe.
So a way of describing an object without describing the object, almost.
Yeah, exactly. Or like without interpreting what it is that you have picked up out of the ground or why it was there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible to read now, because you're like, so this stone object that has this and this angle and is this and this big and weighs this and this much was found in a deposition with other objects that were shaped in, and then they go into this long list of things. And it's just lists. And
I suppose if you get down to that state, that scientific purity, as it were, you end up with a situation where the data is, you can't compare it, it can't be cross-referenced, and then you end up with no overall interpretation, I suppose, either. So if you did that, say, with the Avebury Stonehenge kind of broad landscape, it would be hell on earth, wouldn't it? It'd be like trying to...
We have like years of reports from archaeological digs that we just need to try and go through, and in best case scenario you can find the archaeologist who did it and they kind of remember the dig, so they can later on kind of interpret their own reports for others so we can understand it. But no. And I suppose actually that might be a fairly neat way to sort of, I suppose, conclude our discussion today, is just to, I suppose, reflect on the fact that actually the artist element, the imagination element, is what brings the data together into a coherent whole that we can. Because actually also it's important that we should be able to comprehend these concepts in our heads, and because we're not actually necessarily scientific minds, as it were. You know, we deal with ideas. Even scientists deal with ideas, or they visualize things.
So it's important to be able to do that, but also I suppose maybe what we've been touching on is the question of literacy. And just as it possibly should be a little bit more shameful to say, oh, I'm just terrible at maths. I don't know, I'll just go and get a calculator. And while some people, yes, they can struggle with maths, you can always get a bit better. It's just that it can be a bit of an effort.
You need to get it going and do it.
Yeah. And so maybe what we should be pushing for is a general archaeological literacy. And so, for example, actually, we had to, well, we didn't have to, but we were given the opportunity in my degree to go into, say, how the electrons leave the metal being analysed in a mass spectrometer, this kind of thing. Even though I was doing an arts degree, and I've since been told that's a rare thing to be offered.
Yeah, I mean, we know.
No.
Carbon dating is still kind of magical to me. I'm just kind of like, I kind of understand the broad thing, but no, don't ask me to like question a carbon dating, because no. No. Well, I suppose you get the impression that some archaeologists go, yeah, I know it has to be calibrated. Don't ask me what that means, but it's calibrated. These dates have been calibrated. Good. And that's often where archaeologists leave it. And maybe what we should be striving for is a situation where everyone has a good grounding in how this stuff works. Yeah.
And I imagine actually that will help also archaeologists to apply it more effectively rather than just...
It should. I mean, when I did my ancient DNA course in 2010, I really grasped some things about how to conserve bones and materials, so that gives the basic to even be able to do that in a plausible way without contaminating evidence and stuff like that. That I wouldn't have thought about otherwise.
No.
Because I didn't realize how sensitive the equipment is.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. Have we reconciled the art-science debate?
I hope so. But then again, if we have robbed people of so many good pub rums.
Oh, this is true. Yeah, good rants.
You can still discuss this even though we have given you the answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I mean, we've zipped it up for all time now, but feel free to unzip it at home. It's fine. Obviously not. But no, it's been interesting thinking about this stuff, and hopefully, folks at home will have an interesting perspective. Actually, if you want to comment below, or maybe share some anecdotes that you have, especially as archaeologists, on this particular thing,
or friends of archaeologists,
then we'd love to hear, actually. So please do comment below, and who knows, we may even revisit this topic in the near future when we're not quite so tired, perhaps. Yeah. Anyway, with that in mind, first of all, bye bye, Liv.
Bye bye.
And as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.